Hi, everyone. This is the Leadership with Heart podcast, and this is Heather Younger, your host. Employee experience and retention is powered by emotions. Managers and or leaders within organizations get to choose which emotions they unleash from within the people they lead. Leaders, meaning supervisors or above in an organization, drive much of the positive or negative emotions by their actions or inactions, their words, or what they fail to say. When a manager chooses their words and their actions carefully, they exhibit great emotional intelligence. These managers are often thought of as leaders who care, or as I like to call them, leaders with heart. This special brand of leader drives engagement and loyalty simply by being themselves. Are these leaders perfect? Absolutely not. It is in their awareness and sharing of some of their imperfections that we realize their brilliance. In this podcast, I ask you to see yourself in the stories my guests tell about the times when they were not the best versions of themselves, but how they used their hearts to guide them to a place of deeper connection with their teams and heightened leadership prowess. Before we get started, I wanted to remind you to follow us on Twitter at Customer Fanatics. That's customer and then Fanatix. And also just follow me on LinkedIn at Heather Younger. That is because I'm in the process of writing a book based upon this podcast, which will have amazing stories of those on the show. And I'm going to be going a little deeper too, so you will not want to miss it. But I'll be putting out tidbits, asking for feedback related to the book cover and just ideas and colors. I want you to be a part of that. I want you to lend your voice to that. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at customerfanatics.com, and you'll get a couple freebies as well, including the first chapter to my book and some emotional intelligence tips as well. Thank you so much for listening, and hopefully you enjoy this show. Hi, everybody. This is Heather with the Leadership with Heart podcast, and today I'm super thrilled to be talking to Ian Sohn today on the podcast. He is someone so I stumbled upon him. I was looking at something on LinkedIn, and a friend of mine shared an article from Working Mother, and it was talking about an executive who really had I think, more of a unique way of looking at kind of a work-life integration, but just the whole person, the whole employee and what they do outside of work and what his expectations were. So Ian was that person. So welcome. I can't wait to talk to you about this.
Thank you. It's really good to be here. I appreciate it.
So where are you right now in your leadership journey?
Currently, I am the president of the Chicago office of a large global marketing communications agency called Wunderman Thompson. And I have been in this role for about a year. And I would say that I've been in leadership roles for close to the last 10 years, as they're kind of commonly defined.
Yeah, and that's I like the way you said that, because I think I know where you're getting to with that, which is that we all lead, whether we have a title or not. But
absolutely,
the traditional framework of do you manage people is kind of when we think about people that can be leaders. But I agree, there's no invitation to be a leader, right? The invitation is when someone needs you and you're there for them, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I see people at all levels of my organization leading in their own kind of appropriate way, 100%.
I love that. I think because number one, I think the bar is raised for everyone in your presence, irrespective of title. So if someone says, well, I don't have the authority, and you're like, well, I'm giving you the authority. You don't need the title to have that, you know?
Right. That's right.
No excuses. We're all in it together.
That's right. And in terms of kind of my journey, where I'm at on my journey, I mean, I like I said, I've been leading in the kind of traditional sense for years, and that's something that I'm very comfortable with. And what I'm trying to do now at this stage of my career is figure out how I can, be a more effective and empathetic leader, but also how I can kind of transfer some of the things that I've learned to people who I work with, or people who are looking for jobs, or people who just want advice. So I've gone from kind of leading for myself to, as much as possible, leading for others as well and trying to teach others. So it's been really rewarding.
That's great. And that we see it everywhere when we read things about leaders, is, that sign of the great leader is the one who is transferring and the one who is growing and lifting up those that are in their presence versus just themselves. And So I do like that idea. And I think it's great that you even admit to that's kind of I always I call leadership as a journey, but I also look at it as a conversion process too, right? Like how we start off first managing people and how hopefully we might evolve to the place where we say, well, wait a second, I got to step outside myself. This is more about these people and what they need from me and how I can serve them. And not everybody starts at that place. We get there over time, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. And as cliche as it may sound, the more that you think about it that way, the more you end up actually growing as a leader. So there's a really nice kind of feedback loop. The more you give, the more you get, and the more you grow.
I love that.
Yeah. Love
it. Give, get, grow. I always I do titles for these podcasts, and so that might be in there.
Great.
So where does your drive to lead come from? I'm curious. Some of it starts there are people who say, oh, well, I had a lot of great leaders in my life and they inspired me to do it. Sometimes as well, as a child, I was doing it. There's just so many different reasons. I'd love to know what yours is. Where does your drive to lead come from?
Yeah, I think there's probably, like most people, there's probably no single source of drive. It's a soup, as I like to say. I have been unbelievably fortunate in my career to work for and be around incredible leaders. And it's something that I know I'm really fortunate to have experienced, and I feel a responsibility to pass that on to others. I think it's being a leader and thinking about leadership is part of my job description. So I have an obligation to my organization. And I also just think from a human perspective, it's just an interesting thing to think about and work on. It's not a hard kind of technical skill. And I find that really rewarding and fun and interesting and challenging. And so I think it's a combination of things that drive me to really focus on leadership.
How do you think that the people that report to your direct reports, how would they describe your leadership style?
Depends on the day of the week. It's funny. I'm sure at some point in your career, maybe not, but some of your listeners have taken those, have gotten a 360 evaluation, right? So from your and your colleagues and people who report to you. And my perception of myself is always so different than those around me. And so it's so hard for me to self-reflect, but I think they would say that I am, I hope they would say that I'm caring and generous, and I give people a lot of freedom, but I also am constantly encouraging and enabling people to ask for help or ask for my opinion when they need it or when they feel unsure about how to do something. I don't, clearly, if you've read the LinkedIn post that we're talking about, I don't micromanage. I really trust people. I have this very basic philosophy that there's a reason that we hire and pay people a salary, and that's because they can do a job. And so far be it from me to kind of tell them how to do their job. So I think those are some of the things people would say. I have a good sense of humor. I don't take myself very seriously at all, which I think people appreciate. So those are some of the things.
That's great. Yeah, I do agree. Man, it is true. I can think for myself how I've, over time taken myself too seriously. I don't really see that. I haven't seen that kind of feedback in any of my, in the 360s I've done, but I can sense sometimes that I do like an intensity. There's an intensity that there's just a seriousness about stuff generally.
Yeah,
and
I think it's something that I've worked on the last couple of years, that intensity. It's funny, just a couple of weeks ago, I had somebody very senior at work tell me that they were they're surprised at how kind of nonplussed I get at kind of heightened situations. I can just kind of, I tend to remain fairly unfazed, or at least I try to not show that I'm fazed by something. I try to remain calm. Obviously, being one of the senior people in the room, your tone and mood kind of sets the tone for the rest of the room. So I try not to get hysterical, because all it does is get everybody else hysterical, and then nothing gets done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's an interesting, that alone could probably take us a long time to talk about, but I want to go into that a little bit too. Yeah. So this idea of how much we show to the people that we lead, and whether we show them like we are, basically Superman with capes and steel and, don't really have things affect us, or we show bits and pieces in controlled ways that still let them know we're human. There's that human side of leadership, right? Where we don't have all the answers, which I can tell you're not that person, that you do go to people that, maybe know more than you in one area or not. But then this idea that we, don't have to be perfectly composed. We don't have to be, just perfect in every way. And so that we can sometimes show that there's an uneasiness about something, but also that we're staying rational and thinking through it, right? So for example, I was talking to someone, and it's been a little while on my show, and she was saying that she was in an executive meeting and things got heated. There was debate, there was all this stuff, right? And she came out and she's like, I have to make sure that I don't bring all of this energy, and wasn't positive energy, out of the room and into my people. But at the same time, I have to let them know things are not going down the right path, and that this is how our team is going to wrap our arms around this and kind of get it right. And let's start brainstorming together on how we're all going to do this, and like just chip in and get it right. So I'm curious to know your perspective on stuff like that, where it's where you kind of have to open the door a little, how much, how do you gauge when it's too much or not enough, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's such an interesting topic. I mean, you have to, if you are frustrated or upset or angry about something, I do think that you have to communicate it, because people have to know how you're feeling in order to kind of react or help you fix it or solution it or whatever it may be, or just to understand that you're just not happy with something. I think what we all struggle with is how to do that in a productive, respectful way, without making it feel personal or hysterical or whatever the case may be. So what I try to think about a lot, and I'm sure there are times when I'm good at it and times where I could do way, way better. I try to think about what do I need to show from an emotional standpoint, in addition to the words that I use? What do I need to show emotionally so that everybody in the room understands exactly the point I'm trying to make? It's almost like if the words are the bones or the skeleton, the emotions are like the clothes that I'm dressing it up in, to make sure that I'm kind of communicating the right image to the room so that they know where I'm coming from and where I want to go. But yeah, it's really hard. I mean, there have been times where I'm sure that I've walked out of rooms and thought, boy, I would have handled that differently, or boy, I really wish I would have not said that or kept that emotion in check, or whatever it may be. But we're all humans, at the end of the day, it's like, it's who we are.
Yeah. Oh, I've definitely done that more more than I care to admit.
Yeah. I mean, and I it's why I never hold it against people when they show their human side, even if it comes out wrong. If there's intentionality there, good intention, I should say, then it's okay, because they're trying to do the right thing. It's, there's this phrase that I don't know where I stole it from, but I use it all the time. It's, when somebody has good lenses, bad frames, right? So, it's like their intentions are right. It's just not quite, not quite molded, or there's something just a little off by it, but they mean well, and I can excuse that.
How do you coach to that? So like, when you're talking about excusing that, how do you actually coach that? I'm so curious. So for example, you have one of your team members and this particular person, and they're coming from a good place. They pretty much always are, but it doesn't come out the right way. What do you do after that happens, where it just doesn't come out well, and now you've got to kind of make sure it doesn't replicate itself?
Yeah, I'm very quick to pull somebody aside and say, hey, teachable moment here. Next time you might want to think about phrasing that this way, or you might want to think about not bringing that kind of emotional thing up in a meeting with a room full of people, or how else could you have handled that situation. So I think talking about it, and I think talking about it and discussing it as soon after the fact as possible, so that the person can really kind of put themselves in that headspace and go, oh, okay, I could see how that was perceived in a way that I didn't intended, and I could see how saying it differently or doing it differently would have had a better impact or a better outcome.
And I like the idea of not waiting. I think, I read a lot of employee survey comments. That's a big part of the work that I do. And so what I see often is that in there, the employees that are going there going, I wish this person would hold this person accountable. Our team is, there's a lot of our team that's not doing this. And it's because they're those leaders who are not pulling their people aside and giving them the teachable moment,
right.
Either on the spot or just, again, after they've received a piece of feedback from a coworker or something like that, right? They're just afraid to handle that with that. It's more of a productive, it's not even really a conflict. I always tell people that if I can course correct out of love, so if I've already built my relationship with you so much so that we trust one another, and you know that if I come to you with some feedback, either personally and something I've experienced or something someone else has come to me with, I'm coming to you out of a true deep caring for you. So it's, the leader has to do the hard work up front so they can have that conversation without leaving them feeling completely devastated.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a thinking in particular about a woman who I hired, probably about 10 years ago. She was one of the first people I hired when I started working on the agency side of the advertising business. And she and I still, to this day, we haven't worked together for, probably 6 years. We have a wonderful relationship. Actually, she just texted me yesterday. And the tone and frankness of the way that we communicate with each other still, we just had coffee about a month ago. We love each other so much that I don't have to, if I give her feedback or advice or she to me, there's so much built-in respect and love that we don't have to set it all up and kind of, there's no kind of, to be pressed, there's no kind of foreplay, right? It's just kind of like, it's like, hey, Em, listen, that was really dumb the way you handled that. Or like, what were you thinking? And there's no, and then afterwards there's no baggage because we've got such a strong kind of foundation and relationship and history together. So
I love that. And so that's exactly right. I think that the leader really should always be striving to have those relationships with every single one of their direct reports, because that's just where I think it makes the workforce, the workplace it does feel like family, and it does feel like there's a connection there, and you want to stay because there's honesty and there's caring there. So
the interesting thing is the difference between people who you hire at a fairly early part of their career, when they don't have preconceived notions of what relationships are like in the workplace or how things should be in the workplace, versus somebody who comes in at a different point in their career that maybe has some real scar tissue, right? Or some real baggage from bad relationships with managers or colleagues, whatever. And there's a real difference in how you have to kind of establish those relationships with those two different people. That the person who's just coming in and just starting their career, you're really showing them what professional life could be like, and hopefully you're setting a really good example. And those people who are coming with the scar tissue, what you're trying to do is help them kind of unlearn some really bad behaviors and reassure them that actually there are places you can work that are safe, and you can be vulnerable, and you can be honest, and you can disagree, and that you won't be punished for that. It's just really two different kinds of people, two different kinds of relationships. Hopefully you end up at the same place, which is this place of trust and respect and honesty.
I love that. So for those who are listening and of course didn't see that article that I referred to earlier, Can you give us a synopsis of what you were really getting to the bottom of in that article? If you recall it yourself, since you do so many interviews?
Yeah. So the construct of the piece, it was on LinkedIn, was essentially telling people that they do not need to apologize for having a life outside of work or having a life in addition to work. And so it was like, you never have to tell me that you're going to be back online after dinner, or that you're going to watch a movie on your next flight versus logging onto email, or that you have a dentist appointment, or your kid has a soccer game, or whatever it may be. And I've been asked a lot the last couple of days, like why I wrote this now. And truthfully, I have no idea. I mean, I always have kind of a list of probably 5 to 10 things kind of rattling around in my head, topics, personal, professional, whatever, that come out in various different ways. Sometimes I'll write something on LinkedIn, or sometimes I'll write something down and throw it away, or who knows. I'm not a professional writer. And I think in this case, last couple months I've been traveling a lot. Work has been, as work is, stressful, etc. I think in this case, I was probably writing a letter to myself, kind of a reminder to myself to kind of be easy on myself. And this is just how it came out. And apparently it resonated with a lot of people.
Absolutely, it did. Okay, so we all know that you're obviously more emotionally intelligent just based upon our conversation and the article you wrote. It's obvious. And I like to talk to people like you. One of the things I want to bring out, though, is have you share with the listeners a time when you may not have been so proud of the leader you were, and what you did to come out of it, like a specific example of how you were in a particular situation that you were like, that wasn't so great. And then what did you do to come out of it?
Yeah. I'll be somewhat vague, but I actually can think of a moment that I was very, my intentions were noble. Again, good lenses, bad frames. My intentions were noble, and the way that I behaved, I just didn't, afterwards, I didn't like it. I was in a meeting years ago, working on a project, and there was a group of people working on it, and there was somebody on the team who I felt was kind of speaking meeting after meeting very condescendingly about a woman on the team. And it started to get me really, really frustrated, increasingly frustrated in every meeting, until finally in one meeting in a room full of people, it kind of came to a head. And I basically read this guy the riot act. And in my mind, it was, I just had to put an end to this behavior. And the second thing was, I was sticking up for a woman who was a friend and a colleague. And what I realized immediately thereafter was two things. One, I shouldn't have done it in a room full of people, right? I should have pulled them aside and said something. And the second thing, and most importantly, and she and I talked about it so much afterwards, and we still, every once in a while, I'll bring it up to her and we'll laugh about it, is who was I to be defending her? Like why did I feel like that was somehow my role? I said to her afterwards, I said, I feel so, in a bad way, kind of paternalistic about what I did. And she said, she's a wonderful human being. She said, your intentions were wonderful. They were caring. I really appreciate them. And I also appreciate you apologizing for, feeling like you had to come to my defense as if you couldn't do it. And so it was a really good learning moment for me. And that actually awesome.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And I think I'm the same way. I'm kind of like that natural advocate. Yeah. And I think most people appreciate it, but not always, senior lealership or whatever, they may not appreciate it because, again, they're going, why are you getting involved or what's going on?
Well, also, I think, I think some people, a lot of people, me actually, we're capable of defending ourselves, right? Or advocating for ourselves, or we should be at least. And, I like to advocate for other people, but but I am very conscious now about doing so when I know they want me to, versus just assuming they want me to.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Yeah, I get some little awakenings here and there too. And the other day I was in I do a lot of employee focus group facilitation, culture teams, things like that. And one of the meetings I was in the other day, we were doing something, we got to the end, and then one of the employees says, well, can he actually like state his mind too? And he was talking about like one of the executives, like, can we actually hear from the executives who are in the room? And I just assumed that the people that they didn't want to say anything, like they didn't say anything on this particular topic. So I didn't say, what about you? Can you also give your feedback? But one of the team members said, can our executives speak up? You know, it was that kind of thing.
Right.
And it just made it was clear in that instance is that they definitely have the ability to open their own mouths.
Right. Yeah, that's right. That's exactly
right.
Yes, exactly.
That's interesting. Okay. So when how many direct reports do you have?
Well, I mean, I run 4 different offices. I have about 270 people in 4 different offices. So direct reports, it's off the top of my head, somewhere between 6 and 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what do you do when because you travel so much, they're probably traveling, you're all over the place. What do you do to reconnect with them in a deeper way that kind of comes back to center and says, like, we are a team, we're here together, we're on the same, path, same mission. What do you do to reconnect with them?
Yeah, it's honestly probably one of the biggest challenges that I face on a daily basis, and I'm sure I'm not alone. I haven't come up with a good answer, if I'm being completely honest. I mean, the only thing that I've been able to do that makes me feel less disconnected to them is to be as responsive as possible, to communicate with them, even when it's not work related. So silly things, small things that seemingly insignificant, like sending a text to, my human resources lead or my finance lead in the morning, instead of just jumping into work, sending a text saying, hey, good morning, haven't seen you in a while, what's going on? Things like that. And just trying to be a little bit more human when I don't have a lot of that FaceTime. And then when I am in the office or when I'm in another office, I spend a lot of time, in fact, I get made fun of all the time. I spend a lot of time walking around. So not only am I fairly antsy, but I also very much believe in, management by walking around. And so, you just physically just being in people's spaces and hearing their voices and talking to them and kind of looking them eye to eye. And so I do a lot of that too.
Good. Well, I think that's kind of all we can hope for in many cases. You're right. You're not alone.
Yeah.
I do like when I invite people on and I ask, and most of everybody has a, similar, and sometimes you'll get kind of the odd off thing that someone does. But I think this is the beauty of leadership is we're all human and we're not perfect. And it's all it's a journey, but it's an evolution, and we're all just going towards being better. It's, constantly improving and finding better ways. And so I think we work with what we have. And that is really the message here, is that we're, there could be just one thing you do, like this idea of, well, when I am there, I do this, or sending the text message. That may seem insignificant. Well, it's very significant to the person who receives the text message.
Right.
And even though you may think, well, that's just one less, whatever, it's not a big deal. It goes really far. But those are the really big significant things that you can do as a leader. Just remembering the person and showing that you care is all we can really do. Especially when you have a global business that you're traveling all over and people are dispersed everywhere. Yeah, it's hard.
I think that the thing that if I'm being honest, the emotion that I feel more often than not is guilt, right? So guilt that guilt I'm not there, or guilt that I can't give person X or person Y the kind of time that they might want or they might need. And it's definitely a self-imposed, nobody's making me feel guilty, it's self-imposed guilt. And what helps is, more often than not, when I say to somebody, hey, him or Janie or whomever, I feel so guilty that I've kind of short shrifted you the last week or whatever, 100 times out of 100, they will look at me like, what are you, insane? Like, shut up. Who cares? You're fine. Don't worry about it. And so that's the thing that I feel a lot, is that guilt. And I try to remember that it's very much self-imposed for the most part.
Mm. Yeah, those are. I just did a video the other day, and it was literally talking about kind of the weight of leadership on our shoulders, whether it's at home or in a community, wherever it's at. It's kind of this weight that we have, and this idea of how we can let it just really get to us, and instead trying to be thinking about this fluidity of what the leadership represents, and the humanness that you and I've been talking about is so critical. Once we realize that humanity doesn't mean perfection, doesn't mean always like I'm just a shiny example of this perfect textbook leader. My humanity brings the guilt up, and all these other emotions come inside, and that's okay. I mean, if we don't show that, I guarantee you will be a lot less effective. People won't be bonded to you if you don't, right?
Yeah.
So
I love that. I love the term fluidity, because it does feel fluid. And I think this is such a bizarre aside, but I flew to San Diego last week or 2 weeks ago, and for the first time ever, I flew directly over the Grand Canyon, which was amazing.
Ooh.
It was so amazing. I was so grateful to have a window seat. And
nice.
All I kept thinking for the, whatever it was, 7, 8, 10 minutes we flew over the Grand Canyon was, wow, water is the most powerful thing on the face of the earth. This is insane that this enormous hole was formed by water. So I think about kind of fluidity and kind of letting things flow, et cetera, and letting things take a natural course and not trying to kind of force anything. So I love that. I love that word, fluidity. I'm gonna start using it. The other thing that you made me think of was, we spend a lot of time as leaders worrying about other people and about business and about whatever it may be. I do an okay job of it. I go through phases, but we have to also worry about taking care of ourselves. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And whether that's eating healthy or exercising or whatever, meditating, whatever it may be, or just walking away from something when it doesn't feel right, or taking a break, or whatever it may be. But I think that's one of the things that I see leaders really fail at a lot, which is why we'll get ulcers and shingles and things like that, is because because they don't take care of themselves, right? They're too busy taking care of other people, And I think you're a much more effective leader when you take care of yourself also.
Absolutely. So true. This is a message that it's been resonating a lot. It's been coming up a lot inside of these things, but of course in my own life, all the way around, right? Just everywhere it's there. And so when I did that TED Talk recently, there was another gal, one of the first speakers, literally, I think she might have been a stay-at-home mom, and she has like a blog, and her whole concept is about taking care of us. And that was what her talk was about. It was really quite powerful. To be like this idea of giving ourselves permission, because that's hard as a leader of anything, whether we are like leaders by title, our parents, whatever that is, just giving ourselves permission to say, I'm going to say no to this thing, or I'm going to take a break right now, or whatever that is.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, even and it can be really small things. I mean, that same trip that I flew to San Diego over the Grand Canyon, on the way back, literally, and this kind of found its way into the piece that I wrote on LinkedIn. On the way back, instead of opening my computer and logging onto email and doing work, I watched 5 or 6 episodes of Arrested Development. It's just I just didn't want to do work, and I just said to myself, you know what? That's fine. I'm fine. I'm okay doing this. It will make me a better human being when I get home. So that's what I did.
Love it. I love it. I do that same thing. It's like, I'm just going to do, and for me, it's like, I just want to do something that just makes no sense. I just want to like watch something that has no learning. Of course, there's nothing you can do that you can watch that has no learning. You know what I mean?
But yeah, totally. I know exactly what you mean, though. It just feels good sometimes. It's like, I don't read trashy novels, but it feels like it would be one of those things. It's like, if I read trashy novels, I actually probably should just read trashy novels.
I know.
Like a nice escape,
So for those who are listening, and let's say someone's struggling in their leadership, someone's just at a different crossroads or need some inspiration, what might be like one pearl of wisdom, one piece of, and maybe it's the self-care idea. Maybe that's the thing you want to leave people with. But if it isn't, I'd love to hear if there's something else, that one thing you'd like to leave them with.
Yeah, I have said this to so many people over the years, and it's really easy to say, and I guess it's pretty hard to do, but it's, you cannot copy somebody else's version of leadership, right? You can take bits and pieces from people or people who are famous or people you admire, but at the end of the day, you have to be yourself in the way that you apply those learnings to your own leadership style. And so there is nothing worse than somebody doing a bad imitation of another leader. And I just think whenever you don't know what to do or you find yourselves at a crossroads, I just think the most important thing to do is to just be yourself and kind of try to almost take a step back and look at yourself and go, does this look like me? Does this feel like me? Does this sound like something I would say or something I would do? And really be honest about it. And again, it's such a soft piece of advice, but it's something that I try to think about a lot.
I think that's pretty powerful for you guys who are listening. This may be the second time we've heard this concept that's like this, even just recently. I think it's worth us, letting it percolate in our heads, just going around and around to be thinking about how much are you the best version of you? Sure, we can use others as guides to help us think things through, but in the end, we have to show up as our own powerful selves and not as a lesser version trying to imitate someone else. I really, really appreciate that, Ian. That was pretty powerful.
Thank you.
So for those of you who are listening, if you enjoyed all of this that you've heard today, please do obviously share it and rate and review it wherever you're listening as well, because it helps the algorithm find this podcast over others that might be out there. But this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for joining, Ian.
Oh, it's been great. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
And thanks everybody for joining the Leadership with Heart podcast. Thank you for listening to the Leadership with Heart podcast. You can grab the show notes by visiting customerfanatics.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter.